welcome Nicole Stanley to the podcast. I'm so honored to have you on here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to jump right into it. And there was something that I saw within your social media, that a quote that you said, and it really just stuck out to me. And what it was is that money is less about commas and more about contentment in your life. And I would love for you just to speak on that because I think this is something that will really touch a lot of us.
Yeah, I think that for many women, particularly, and I know I was one of them, a lot of us, we maybe are less concerned with saving money or building a certain net worth, not in the same way that men are, because we can often feel, at least for me, I felt like it was a selfish kind of venture. It was almost like unfeminine to want money. Right. And so I think because of that, it can feel like financial goals are more like superficial than real. And what I always like to kind of view it as is that when I'm setting a financial goal, yes, it includes a certain amount of money. It includes commas, right?
Mhm.
But really, what I'm often searching for or aiming for in my life is some sort of contentment, some sort of security that I don't have, some sort of ability to be generous, right? And so instead of framing financial goals for women as how much money you have, I like to frame it in terms of what you'll be able to do in your life or be able to give to others. And that often is a much easier thing to motivate us. At least it does for me. So I could imagine that people listening to this, if you are used to kind of viewing money in terms of greed or whatever, it can be a different viewpoint when you think about having a financial goal.
I love that. And like just going off of that, like, because it really spoke to me when I saw that quote, because so much of, I think a lot of people who listen to this and, myself, my past version of myself would like base my worth on like external expectations. Like, oh, if I get to this amount of money, then I'm worth this much, or, and that's what the driving force was. But what I love about what you just said is that it really takes it into us and gives it meaning of like, what does this bring to our lives? And like, how does this allow us to live a more free, fulfilling, purposeful life? So I love that reframe of this to feel like, we are worthy of having wealth in our life. And it's not this selfish venture that, that many of us may perceive or have gained some of these perceptions from maybe our childhood or external means. So I absolutely love that. And I want to dive in because I always love to hear someone's story behind where they are today. And so do you mind sharing your story and what brought you to helping people in this way today?
Yeah, so my name's Nicole. I'm a financial coach. I run Arise Financial Coaching. And my love for personal finance really started with a complete breakdown in terms of realizing that my financial stress was ruining a lot of things in my life. So I grew up in a Puerto Rican American household. My dad worked really hard to give us a good life and move us forward. And so when I got married young, I saw that, I had inherited a lot of financial stress and worry. And so I got married. We made a very low amount of money at the time, or an average amount of money. When we were engaged, I think my husband made 24,000 a year and I was just out of college. And so when we were planning our wedding, I was doing our budget like over and over and over and over again. And one day I had my first panic attack about money because I realized, the numbers weren't numbering. And I looked at him and said, if we can't afford this wedding where our friends are baking the cake and doing the drinks and doing the flowers, how the heck are we going to afford a life together? And I realized that that recurring anxiety really was showing up everywhere. It showed up on my wedding day. It showed up on the way to my on the flight to my wedding. It showed up my whole first year of marriage. And, it took something that was good, exciting, getting married, and just tainted it with this overwhelming stress and anxiety. And so I realized at that time that I wanted to get help in two ways. First, I wanted to start going to therapy, which changed my life. The second is that I wanted to learn as much as I could about personal finance so that I could feel in control of my future, my choices, and what we would have in life. And so learning about personal finance and starting to put those principles into action changed the course of my personal life. So my husband and I paid off over $30,000 worth on an average annual income of 56,000 a year. And then we were able to build our family's net worth as we grew to having two children to over $250,000 by age 27. And then we're able to save enough so that even if we never invest more money in our own retirement, by age 27, we knew that we would still be able to retire multimillionaires. And that's when you hit a coast fire goal, right? And I share those numbers because a lot of people would say, well, you were young, you had kids, you weren't making that much money. And all of that is true, right? But the truth about personal finance education and having that really set attitude on, I'm going to make sure that my family's secure, really did change kind of my stress level in life because I knew I could choose what I wanted to do for work, what I wanted to do for my kids, if I wanted to stay home, work, whatever. And people around me started to notice a big change in me because my stress wasn't so high. And people would be like, wow, you just seem like you're in such a better mood, whatever. And it was like, wow, my financial stress was really holding me down. So I started to naturally help friends and family for free for a few years. I did not know financial coaching was an industry, it was a profession. I just knew that I liked helping people make goals and feel in control of their money. And when my husband got furloughed in 2020, we kind of looked at each other from across the table because we were single income and said, well, what if you charge somebody? Like, what if you helped, and got more, certification and stuff? And I was like, that would be incredible. And so fast forward now 5 years, and we've helped over 750 people, mostly women and couples, become in control of their money. And it all started because I know that financial stress really takes the joy out of life.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing your story because that's what makes it relatable that there's a lot of shame around this, I think. And that, I've experienced that too. It's like you feel like, oh my gosh, like I missed my opportunity or like, what did I do wrong? Or like, what's wrong with me that I'm in this position? So I appreciate you sharing your story. And it's not that, you had this significant income and then it allowed you to have this financial freedom. It's like building it from a place where many people can relate to, where you're just like trying to get by, living paycheck to paycheck. So I really appreciate that. And do you mind going back to some of those moments like when you first started? Because it can feel so intimidating and so overwhelming when you're in that position, you're looking at your bills and you're trying to afford everything. Like, how do you get started at that point to feel like you have some grasp on your financial health?
Yeah. Well, I think that what I often find, at least for clientele, is that there's two types of people. There are the people who feel financially stressed and decide because it's physically uncomfortable. And
Mhm.
some people decide this consciously or not. There's no shame in it, but we avoid it.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of people like that who feel like they know they're stressed about money and they don't want to look at their bank accounts. It makes them feel anxious. They don't want to look at their debt. And it's just kind of like look away and hopefully it'll get better. Typically it doesn't, but
Mhm.
that's one set of people. The second set of people are the people who say, oh my gosh, I'm really stressed about money and I'd like to do something about it.
Mhm.
What I always like to remind people is that you have to be in the second group. If you stay in the avoidance group, nothing will change because unless you get an inheritance, it might change
Mhm.
or, a big pay raise. But what I always tell people is like, you have to be in that second state where you believe that you can do something and that you are smart enough to figure it out. You are capable enough that you have what it takes to at least figure it out. And when you start to see the problems, giving yourself that grace where you can say, okay, I'm seeing the problems. This is not a death sentence. This is just the obstacles that I'm going to start to make a plan to overcome. I think it's really starting with that mindset. And so if you can look at your finances, have enough courage to look at them. And then, second, have enough courage to say to yourself, I'm seeing this problem or that problem. I don't know how to fix it, but I believe that there is a solution out there, even if I don't know it. That is the ticket, the winner, winner, chicken dinner. If
Mhm.
you've got that mentality, I I firmly believe every financial problem is fixable, but most people don't have the stomach to look at their problems and
Mhm.
start to figure out how to fix them. So if you look at them and you start to figure out how to fix them, you can. I know it for a fact. No matter what your problem is, every financial problem is fixable.
Yeah, it's so empowering to hear because it is like that first group was very much me for much of my life. So I can very much relate. It was like, I'll just turn a blind eye, hopefully get better. And it's like it never did. And then it was really like my brother, who was much more financially savvy, like really was like a big catalyst of me changing that and starting some investments, but definitely could be better at that. But it's so relatable where you're just like, things aren't good, you're feeling the stress of it all, you're navigating all this and you're like, holy, like, and it is like it's that like fear response, it becomes paralyzing.
Yeah,
And
fight or
like,
flight.
yeah, 100%. And it's like, I know I experienced that after finishing my doctorate degree and looking at my student loans and being like, oh my gosh, like, how am I going to ever afford anything or be able to live any kind of life that I was hoping to live? And
Mm.
that was so suffocating. So I appreciate you saying that, like, okay, here, just give yourself some grace, start looking at the things you can tackle and navigate that. Going off of that, another big thing that we hear is like, okay, you have to live off of like peanut butter and jelly. You have to like sell your house. You have to live, in like a tiny house or like really downsize and live this constricted life for so long in order to be able to get yourself out of some of those places. Can you speak on that? Because I know your message is doing it without sacrificing living.
Yeah, I think that kind of that's the classic personal finance advice that everyone is used to, and so because of it, we just tune it out. We think like, "Oh, if I wanna be someone who's good with money, then I need to hate my life, or I need to," like you said, "live on peanut butter and jelly, rice and beans, live in a crappy house." I
Mhm.
don't know, right? Um, and what I always like to present is that financial goals are very, very, flexible,
Mhm.
right? People see their finances as this like fixed thing. It's like, I have to spend less here if I want to do this.
Mhm.
And that's why I think financial coaching is so cool, because somebody's financial picture is actually extremely vast, right?
Mhm.
They've got so many expenses that are going on. They've got so many different areas that they, even their income is flexible because it all depends on what's their industry, where are they working, how long have they worked there, are they due for a raise? Like there's all these different parts of a financial life that are so nuanced. And yet, the personal finance advice that everybody gets is, oh, you want to save money? Stop going to get coffee, right?
Mhm.
It's so basic. And it makes a lot of people feel that, well, if I like my Starbucks, I guess I'm just not going to retire early.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
really, good financial planning is actually financial creativity. It is knowing the things that you value and the things that you don't, and being able to work within those. And so, what I always tell people is that every financial, expense, a lot of it is a choice we get to make. And we either like that choice or we don't. And if we don't like that choice, that tells me we might have to consider something different, right?
Mhm.
So I can give a personal example. Like my husband and I are currently, we moved across the country. Now we live in New England and Massachusetts, and it's very expensive. And we came here to be by family, and we did it because that brings more value to our life. And so there's less stress between us about, well, we're spending more on taxes, we're spending more on property taxes, we're spending more on insurance. We're like, you could go down the line and see
Mhm.
all the things we're spending more in. But because we were able to say, what's our value here? We're able to say, we're going to spend more here. And then these are the things that we value less, that we're going to spend a little less on. Um, and, when I think about when we're buying a house, my husband grew up in a very small house. He wants to not be in that small of a house because he's like 6'5", so he gets like
Mhm.
claustrophobic
Mhm.
the house. And so you might say, well, oh, if he wants a bigger house, that means your budget needs to double. And it's like, well, actually, we really like putting our own personal touch when we buy a house
Mhm.
and redoing the floors how we'd like it to be, right? So it's like, instead of buying a turnkey house, we want to buy an uglier cosmetically house
Mhm.
that's a little bit bigger so that we can do those things too, right? So it's like many people see every financial decision as like A plus B equals C, when sometimes you have to rewrite the equation and figure out, well, if A has to be there, how can we rethink B in a whole new way? And there's so many options that I firmly have seen in my work with clients that you can pay off debt, you can build your savings, and you can do it your way, right? Because if you're not excited about your financial plan, you're not going to do it. So
Mhm.
we have to find a way that you're going to be excited doing it. And sadly, we can't always find that from a book. We can't find them on Google because every person is different. And so your finance journey should look different.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that because it is like you often feel it's like that one size fits all. Like this is how you have to fit. It's like trying to fit, a square peg in a round hole. Like it just doesn't work. And then there's that like resistance. It's the same thing with health. Like when you're trying to do what everybody tells you you're supposed to do, you can do that short term, but the willpower will wean
Way.
out. And
Yeah.
then you're left in the same position, almost worse, because you're like, well, I tried it and I didn't, I quote failed at it, even though maybe it was not the right position for you to be in. So I appreciate you saying how nuanced it is and that you can really create like a value system and understand like how to create it around your values and not someone else's. So
Yeah,
I love
and
that.
so if you're listening to this now and you feel like you're someone who's bad with money because you've struggled to budget or you've struggled to do, some financial program that you've read, you're not bad with money. You just haven't found the right plan.
Yeah, I love that. And then can you talk about that too? Because you talk about this like financial ignorance where we're just like not educated on this. And this is something, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I'm like, holy, like it just was so eye-opening of like the subconscious beliefs I had around money and just really opened me up to thinking differently. Can you talk about that? How as a society, we often don't have the best financial understanding.
Yeah, I think that I hate to use the word financial ignorance
Mhm.
because I don't
Yeah.
think that's necessarily it. What psychologists have found is that our financial mindset is actually set by age 7. So
Mhm.
they did, I think, a study at Cambridge about this, that most people decide what they think about money by age 7.
Mhm.
Let that sink in for a second.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right? Something as life impacting as money and our financial beliefs are set at age 7. So that tells us, whose financial beliefs do we have?
Mhm. Yeah, it's our parents or whoever was a role model at that time. Mhm.
Yes. And then if we also use logic and say, what were their beliefs?
Mhm.
Who was it based on?
Yeah, their parents, right? It's a generational cycle that you
Right.
see.
And so
Mhm.
chances are, if you grew up in a middle class family, you're probably middle class. If
Mhm.
you grew up in a low income family, you might be low income, you might be more. Some people have that drive, especially from lower income, where they do raise the family social class moving forward. And then a lot of times people who are born into wealthy families end up becoming wealthy.
Mhm.
Sometimes they don't because, for whatever reason, but that's just the belief. Now, a belief is not your life sentence.
Mhm.
It's just the beginning. But
Mhm.
what most of us don't realize is that financial beliefs are malleable. They are not necessarily fixed, set in stone. And so many adults now who are realizing that they have some influence now over their 7-year-old beliefs that they have, when you take the time to update them, that can be a huge catalyst,
Mhm.
because there's nothing in my life that I would trust my 7-year-old self to make a decision about.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
so one of the best things anyone can do is to start to ask themselves, what money beliefs do I have?
Mhm.
Right? And just ask, where did I hear those?
Mhm.
And my favorite question to ask is, okay, so I have this money belief, right? So I'll just give one for example. So I grew up in a must be nice place,
Mhm.
family, right? So when you saw wealth, must be nice, right? You go to the beach, you see a house on the beach, must be nice,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
And so it was this kind of disdain for people who are wealthy. And almost it has this essence of, oh, that person must be lucky and I'm not, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so the question of, is that true? Is that belief true? Right? The answer is no,
Mhm.
because it must be nice. Yeah, maybe that person could be lucky, but what could be a different and more serving belief is if I asked myself, wow, I like that house. Wow, it'd be really cool to live on the beach. I
Mhm.
wonder what I'd have to do to live on the beach.
Mhm.
How would I afford a house like that? Right? Notice one is a shutting down opportunities, and the other is questioning, would I ever want that? Right? And sometimes the answer might be, oh my gosh, I hate the beach. No, I want to live on a lake, or I don't want to live by any water. Flood insurance, no way.
Mhm.
Right? Like, but one is questioning possibilities, and the other is setting a life sentence.
Mhm.
And so, if you can answer any money belief that you have and say, is this true for everyone? And the answer is no, then it's a belief and not a fact. And you could change it if you wanted to start to do that. That
Mhm.
is hugely powerful, because I think that even though we don't get financial education in school, I'm kind of a small believer that it would help a percentage of people. But the real issue is the money mindset that we catch from the people around us.
Mhm.
That's the real influencing factor. And so if you can start to reevaluate, I don't even want to say rewrite. It's just reevaluating some of the beliefs you have and saying, do I still agree with this now as an adult?
Mhm.
And chances are you might not.
Absolutely. And I love how that it shifts the locus of control to be like, oh, they must be lucky, to like, what can I do? What's in my power? And that's really when you can start to take action in
Right.
that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and what I want to, just kind of talk about is like the anxiety around this, because anxiety is a real thing with finances. Whether you have money or you don't have money, there's often a lot of anxiety because sometimes if you grew up not having money and now you have money, you don't want to lose it. So you try to hold on to it. Or if you don't have money, now you're in survival mode thinking like, how am I going to pay this bill? So can you talk about anxiety and how do we navigate making investments and also being like financial savvy, but also feeling this sense of anxiety around it?
Yeah. So the first thing I want to say that I've realized with myself, my clientele who have struggled with financial anxiety, is that it's nothing when you feel financially anxious. Unless you have a true anxiety problem. So I'm talking little a anxiety, not big A anxiety,
Mhm.
right? Um, First thing I want you to know is that it's not um, something to ignore. It's something to pay attention to and to
Mhm.
investigate, because it's telling us something.
Mhm.
So when somebody feels financially anxious, it's actually a clue into what we need to do. Meaning, if you are anxious about losing all of your money because you have a lot of money, that tells me that you're seeking stability and you're seeking less risk. You're
Mhm.
seeking maybe less like liabilities, but something in your body is telling you, I'm unsafe, or I need to know more information.
Mhm.
I love to follow that and say, well, what information do we need? Or what do we need to do to start to make you feel more safe? Right. So using anxiety as like the clue as to where actually we need to go in our financial planning can be really helpful. Or
Mhm.
even if it's just our financial education. I can't tell you how many people I've worked with who are millionaires who wake up in the middle of the night terrified
Mhm.
that they're going to lose everything. And we have to walk through the education on how they are safe. And they
Mhm.
don't have that education. And so they don't know. Right. And then um, when it comes to the anxiety of, oh, I go to the grocery store and I feel anxious that my groceries are so expensive. Let's investigate that. Why do you feel anxious? Because I don't have enough money. You feel you don't have enough money. That's scary. That's objectively scary. Do we? Right? And sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But that anxiety is kind of calling you to investigate something. And sometimes, say you have that anxiety at the grocery store, right? Chances are they don't have a plan for their money, so they don't ever know if they have enough money. So
Mhm.
everything they spend on is always too much, right?
Mhm.
Like, but then once they start to make a plan and they start to see that they're able to save, then they know, oh, I have this amount of money. So the amount of money at the grocery store didn't change. but they changed when it came to their financial planning. And then same thing on the other flip side, which is, let's say you actually don't have enough money for that much groceries and your body's telling you, something's wrong. Like, I'm not safe in this,
Mhm.
right? Then we find out, well, how much are we in the negative every month? People are really afraid of this. People are so
Mhm.
afraid to see, but I always tell people, thank God we know. Now
Mhm.
we know. Now we can make a plan. Now we can start to make changes, and you don't have to feel so bad when you're
Mhm.
spending anymore, right? Or we know we need a 5 grand raise and everything will be, in this lifestyle fine. There's
Mhm.
so many options. And I think that's why, if you're feeling anxiety, don't run away from it.
Mhm.
Lean in and I wonder what it's telling you and what problems you need to fix.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really helpful to reframe it in that way. And going off of that, like I know one of my like limiting beliefs I grew up with is like just work harder, just do more. Like, you know, keep doing like just keep pushing and more productivity and that's how you'll succeed. And so I got, very much grew up with that mentality and got on a track of burning myself out at both ends, feeling like, okay, you want me to do more, but I'm already pushed to the limit. And I know so many people who listen to this podcast are feeling the same way. Like you're trying to raise kids, you're working full time, you're trying to keep a house, like, and then you're like, okay, how do I have the bandwidth or the ability to add any more on my plate? Can you speak to that person of how do you start to become more financial savvy and take some action when you feel like you're strapped already?
Yeah. I think it's funny that you say that, because as I'm talking about financial success, your mind goes to, I have to do more.
Mhm.
That's your immediate response, which is, I have to do more, right? Um and I would question, why is success related to doing more when it could be related to having a different strategy? So you're already doing things every month to improve your money, whether or not you know it, right? You pay your bills, you maybe have a 401k set up. Like, there are actions that you do every month to live, or else you wouldn't have a home, you wouldn't have food. You deal with your money every day. So instead of viewing it as, oh my gosh, if I want to improve my money, I need to add a ton of work to my plate, right? It could be, okay, I'm already putting a ton of work and stress into my money. Is there a better way to do this?
Mhm.
That is a different mentality, because what it does is it says, well, if I do things, if I found a better way to do things for me in my personal life, it would actually take less work for me.
Mhm.
I'd be stressing about it less. Budgeting might be easier. Oh, if I simplified my money too, I would have better clarity, right? So it's like viewing what's on the other side of trying something different. And something different doesn't always mean more.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah,
Does
that's really helpful. And then for that person, like what would be a good starting point? So like someone's listening to this and they're like, where do I even begin? So I know asking the right questions is huge. What would be like the first action step for that person?
Yes. So if you are someone listening and you are like, I'm ready to make improvements to my money, what I would encourage you to do is to start by doing a financial audit. Okay. And a financial audit is the best thing you can do. It's not making a budget, because
Mhm.
everyone's going to tell you make a budget. I'm not telling you that,
Mhm.
because that's actually not going to solve all your problems. And so a financial audit is where you gather everything you've got going on financially, and you can do this in a few ways. Okay. Easiest way would be like, I want you to go to your bank or your credit card or wherever you do your spending, and I want you to export a CSV
Mhm.
of all of your spending over the past 3 months. Okay. Boom. Then you can see, okay, on average, I seem to spend X.
Mhm.
Does that match up with my paychecks? Well, that's a little higher, that's lower, right?
Mhm.
Then maybe you can start to get more granular of like, what am I spending this money on? Whoa, I'm spending bills and I have like I'm trying to make groceries work. My bills are really high, right?
Mhm.
Or I've got all these credit cards. Look how much I'm paying in interest. Or you know, just it's literally the purpose of the audit is for you to say, okay, here's where I am financially, and pretend you're helping a friend. So pretend that you're helping a friend who sat down and said, "Hey, friend, I I feel like I'm stressed about money. I'm not sure why. I feel like I'm not saving, I'm not paying off the debt, or I'm not staying out of debt. or I want to be investing more. What am I doing wrong? And then I would search for 5 problems. Okay. Because when I say every financial problem is fixable, I mean it, because every problem falls into one of these 5. But most of us focus on 1 or 2 things that are only around 2 of the problems. And so your goal during the financial audit is to find out what problem are you actually up against, because that
Mhm.
changes the game. So the 5 financial problems are that it's either a true spending problem. Most people think they have this, most people don't. But
Mhm.
true spending means, like, maybe you struggle with a shopping addiction. It's okay, right? Part of this too is it's non-judgmental. You're just observing and
Mhm.
seeing, what is this person up against? Pretend it's not even you, right? And then it's either a true spending problem, it's either a true fixed expense problem, meaning, your housing, transportation, medical, etc., are just really too high compared to your income.
Mhm.
Then this third problem is that it's a true income problem, meaning no matter how much we get your spending into check or how much we get your expenses into check, like where you live and what it costs to live, the numbers don't add up, right?
Mhm.
This is often the scariest problem for people, but it's fixable.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
fixable if we know we're trying to solve that problem and not just trying to live on PB&J forever.
Mhm.
Fourth problem is problem, meaning you have,
Oh, it cut out right there. So can you repeat that?
yeah, it can be a true money management problem,
Mhm.
meaning this is the budget problem. Everybody, when they start a budget, it assumes that this is their problem, but sometimes it's not.
Mhm.
And money management means you have plenty of money to achieve your goals, to put in savings or whatever. But because you don't have a system every month that, like, accounts for it and makes sure that you use it, the money just flies away, right?
Mhm.
That's a money management problem. And the fifth problem is that you can have a financial strategy problem. And this comes down to financial education. So a lot of people, when they come and they actually have a money management problem, they think they have a strategy problem. So they'll be like, I want to start investing. My problem is that I'm not investing. I should be investing. And I look at their audit and I can say, oh, actually, it's not that your problem isn't that you're not investing. The problem is we actually have a ton of high interest debt that's costing you more.
Mhm.
And you've got a bunch of money in savings, too much money in cash savings that we could be putting towards your debt. And that actually is the strategy step for you, right? And some people do this when they pay off too much debt without having savings. Like, there's a lot of nuance and personalization here. But that's the fifth problem. Every financial problem, action wise, is one of these. They're all affected by upbringing, mindset, etc. But you need to know, what is your actual financial problem. It's some of these, all of these, a part of these. Then make your plan to do that, not just skip straight to, well, I better start investing or I better make a budget.
Mhm.
First, get curious about what your real problem is.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really helpful. I appreciate you breaking it down because that just makes it like you said, removes you from the emotional aspect of it so that you can start solving those problems. And I want to go a little deeper because for someone who maybe is has overspent or who has a ton of student loan debt with high interest and they're looking at it and they're like, how do I even start to pay that down with, the income they have and they feel like nothing adds up and there's no give in any of that, where could that person start? Like, what could they do to navigate that where you have all these debts kind of trailing behind you?
Yeah, I mean, it's overwhelming. And
Mhm.
so I help people like that every day.
Mhm.
I have helped people who have come to me in negative 12 grand a month,
Mhm.
right? I burned through $1 million inheritances,
Mhm.
people who have multiple 6 figures in credit card debt. And there's, I don't know your life listening to this,
Mhm.
but what I do know is that you have a locus of control to improve it. It starts with you believing that. It has to start there, because what they're hoping for right now as I'm talking is they're hoping for me to say, oh, just do this quick fix. Or, oh, actually, those people, they're too far gone. You're not too far gone. You can change your financial life with a couple years of focus. I guarantee it. You can change your financial life with a couple years of focus. Will it be fun? No. Will it all be easy? Probably not. But it's still worth starting, because I always ask, what what feels better. You can have 2 years of feeling stressed about money, or you can have 2 years where you're stressed about money, but you're doing something about it. And at the end of those 2 years, you're better off. The end of the other 2 years, you're worse off. Which one is actually more painful? Most people are going to pick the second one, but
Mhm.
they're overwhelmed by how to get started. So if you don't know how to get started, start with that audit. Start by consuming free financial content and putting it into practice. And then after that, if you try it all, consider working with a financial coach to help you do it, hold your hand, hold you accountable, and help you see things maybe differently than you're seeing them right now.
Mhm.
Because that's often where we get stuck is we see our numbers and we don't see any change because it's all we know is our own situation.
Mhm. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. Just like, I talk about in this podcast with health, like, sometimes you need someone to hold that space for you and to see it more objectively than you can. It's like when you're looking at a painting, your nose is against the painting, you can't really see it. But if
Yes.
you have somebody and you pull yourself back from that, then you can start to see things much more clearly. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate everything you said. I think it's, there are so many nuggets from that people can take from this and really start to move their life forward and take some action. So, really
Not
appreciate
too
that.
far gone. You're not too far gone.
Mhm.
No, no problem is not fixable. You are smart. You are capable. It's
Yeah.
just a starting point.
Yeah, and I know people need to hear that over and over again because it is that, like, so that's that fear response of feeling like I'm done. Like, how do I dig out of this hole? So I appreciate you saying those empowering words and on giving those examples that people have been in really tough positions and have been able to get out of that, because I think it's also that, like, yeah, but you don't know me, so it's like when you hear those examples, you're like, okay, those are some really tough spots that some people are digging out of. So, and then,
Yeah.
so for someone who wanted to connect with you, work with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can follow us on Instagram. We put out so much free content. We also host quarterly, if not multiple times a quarter, free classes so that people can learn more about where they should be focusing in their money, as well as learning specifically about investing for women. We do a lot of education, which I love. Our whole goal is that our content helps you take action in your life not everybody needs a financial coach. I tell people this all the time. Financial coaching is when you've done it all, you've tried it, and you're not seeing the results you want and you need that extra help. Reach out to us. You can always submit an application for financial coaching. We'll have a free conversation with you about your situation to point you in the right direction. And if we're a good fit, then we can make something happen and start working together. But give it a go. You have to first believe that you can make a change, and you're smart, you're capable, you are not too far gone. And then financial coaching is great if you are hoping to get that extra hand to help you do it.
Amazing. I'll put everything in the show notes. So if you're listening to this, definitely check out all of Nicole's resources. And I'm just so grateful for everything you shared today. So thank you so much for being on today.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thank you for everyone who's tuned in today. If you found benefit in this episode or you know someone who could really use hearing these messages, share the episode. It's really these messages that can't be spread out enough. So thank you again.